Today is August 1st, 2020, which means another month has gone by, so it's time for another recap. I don't know if it's just me, but this whole summer's been going by so fast. I can't believe we're already in the month of August. Maybe it has something to do with all the lockdowns and everything that's going on in the world, but it just seems like time is going by so fast. And I'm sorry that during the later half of July I've been kind of inactive on this channel. I haven't been posting a lot or really doing anything. But that has to do with me just having less time to do YouTube. I just started a new job. And I also suffered a really bad ankle injury. I'm not sure if it's broken. I never bothered going to see a doctor, but it hurts a lot trying to walk. So it's really painful that I just want to lay down. I don't even want to sit on the computer desk. But in case you're wondering how I got hurt, I was hiking with my dog. I live on a 100-acre field, so I have plenty of hills and mountains to climb with my dog. And I was running down the mountain because that's what I usually like to do. I like to jog down the hill, and I guess my foot hit a rock and it got twisted and I fell. It was just, I remember when I fell, I was screaming in pain. It was the worst pain I've ever felt in my entire life. I never get hurt, I never get injured, but what happened the other day, it was just really bad. I wanted to make sure I got the recap done because, as you guys noticed, I did a poll on the channel asking if you guys enjoy these monthly recaps, because I noticed that, my monthly recaps don't get a lot of views. They don't really get, compared to all my other videos, the monthly recaps don't really do particularly well. It's not like I only care about views, I'm not trying to say that, but ultimately I want to make content that you guys enjoy, so I wasn't sure if you guys really were enjoying them, but the numbers don't lie. 89% of you want me to continue making the monthly recaps, and that's a pretty big number, so I guess that means I'm going to keep doing them. I love doing them, don't get me wrong, but I just wanted to make sure that it was something that you guys wanted to continue seeing. And on that poll, Dr. Dan left a comment saying, "I very much do, as it's almost like you're communicating with your audience in a way, but it also lets us see how the past month went. Although nothing beats a live stream, I do hope you continue to premiere the recaps." Well, that's exactly what I'm doing right now. This recap is currently live as a premiere. I usually don't like premieres. I kind of think they're obnoxious. You have so many YouTubers where all their videos are premieres, and it's just so unnecessary, but I feel like for a large video like this, it kind of works. And I also like the recaps because it kind of helps my channel stand out a little bit, because I don't really think there are too many other channels that really make the effort to respond and address their community. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't really seem like a lot of YouTubers really care so much about the comments that are being left on their videos as much as the likes, the views, the subscribers, and ultimately how much money they're making. So I really do like taking the time every month and addressing the comments that you guys left on my videos and just reflecting on how I've been doing, and we'll get to that very shortly, but first let's take a look at the numbers. My channel is currently sitting at 3,458 subscribers. I gained 95 subscribers in the last 28 days. And also within the last 28 days, I've seen over 27,000 views, 1,000 hours of watch time, and $16.06 in revenue. And I know the reason why those numbers are down from the previous month. It has a lot to do with that video I made about free Xbox Live Gold that just blew up and got 30,000 views, but the views have slowed down over the past few weeks because, once you make a video, it gets a lot of views within the first week, but then it kind of starts to decline a little bit. So last month I just had that odd video that got over 20,000, 30,000 views, which is a really rare occurrence for my channel. Because the thing about my channel is I am really small. I really only cater to a niche group of people. Like, I'm really not the type of channel that's gonna reach 1 million subscribers or 20 million subscribers. Like, I'm very much aware of that, because the type of videos that I make, they don't really appeal to a wide audience. Because even the big gaming channels, like think of Scott the Woz and all those other people that have over 1 million subs, they're not just gaming information channels, they're also this big kind of larger-than-life personality. I'm not trying to say that I'm boring or that I'm not entertaining. If you guys have seen my live streams before, you know that that couldn't be further from the truth. I can be really entertaining when I want to be. But I just don't see the purpose in making every single video like a comedy sketch. You know what I mean? Like, that's just not how I think. I like to be very analytical. So that might turn a lot of people away from the channel, but it's just something I like to do. That's something that I'm not going to stop doing. But I definitely think the style of how I make my videos is definitely preventing me from getting a lot more subscribers than I could possibly reach. And I'm okay with that, because I like making the videos that I make right now, and I don't see a reason to change it. But let's see what you guys have to say about the videos that I made in the month of July. The first video I made in July was talking about video games potentially being increased from $60 to $70. And in that video, I may have been a little bit too optimistic, because I remember saying that I don't see video games going up to $70 as a permanent increase. Like, okay, so 2K is doing it with 2K21, but that doesn't necessarily mean that all the other companies are going to do it. And I remember the other day seeing that Ubisoft has confirmed that their games will remain at $60 on the PS5 and Series X. So this isn't like becoming an industry-wide thing. Maybe eventually it might happen, but I just don't see it happening anytime soon, especially with the bad economy, especially with the COVID and all that shit going on. I just can't imagine games increasing by another $10 given the current economic circumstances. Now, this is something that does happen every now and then. Back in the PS2 days, games did cost $50, but they were raised to $60. But if there ever is a right time to raise the price for games, definitely right now is not the time. Especially when modern video games, they're not worth $10 extra. All the microtransactions and all the bullshit that we have to deal with, you don't get a full-priced game. And if they do raise prices from 60 to 70, I can't imagine, the microtransactions are suddenly going to go away. I can't imagine the season passes, the DLC, all that's going to go away. So with all that being said, I don't think that it's going to work. I think the market's going to decide, consumers are going to decide how much games are worth, not these companies, not these bullshit journalists that are defending these companies. The power is within the consumer, and I don't think the consumer is going to be willing to spend $70 on a game. But that's just my speculation. Only time can tell about what's actually going to happen in the future with game prices. But let's see what you guys have to say. Alex Weberg says, I feel like 50 to 60 is the perfect price for games today. A lot of these games with Season Pass or Deluxe Editions are already $80 to $110 as is. Is that extra money they're getting from Season Passes not enough? Not even counting all the money companies like 2K get from microtransactions. I hope other companies won't be greedy like 2K. I don't even buy new Call of Duties anymore, but with how broken and unfinished these recent games have been, there's no way I could justify paying $70, let alone $60. And I definitely have to agree. I even said that in the video that even $60 is not a fair price point. Like, I don't pay $60 for new games anymore. I haven't done that in years because I just don't think it's a good value. So, especially if they're going to raise it to $70, I'm definitely not going to buy any new games. But even at $60, I think games are still too expensive. And I'm not the type of person that has to get the game on launch day when it comes out, day one. I don't give a shit about that. But I really don't buy games at $60 to begin with. I'm definitely not going to pay $70 for them. And I'm sure a lot of people feel the same way. Then we have Access2084 who says corporations are deep into YouTube influencer buying. There are a lot of shills posting as regular gamers who are making videos trying to convince people that $70 is necessary. They're practically quoting the corporate script that's been fed to sites like Kotaku, IGN, etc. There are enough suckers playing games now, Fortnite making $4 billion in microtransactions in 1 year, that I won't be surprised if the price becomes a standard. Suckers will buy just about anything. That's why companies like EA are still rolling in cash. And that, of course, is the flip side to the argument that I made in my video, because what I said is that I don't think gamers are stupid enough to pay $70 for new games, while this guy is saying the opposite. He's making the case that gamers are so stupid they'll buy just about anything. I think there are certain instances like Battlefront 2's microtransactions, certain things that gamers have been able to accomplish as consumers and stand up for their consumer rights. But I think you are generally right when you say that the average consumer is kind of oblivious to everything that's going on, that they might just do whatever that they're told to do, right? But on the flip side, in this current economic crisis, if people have the decision to make between buying new games and paying rent, what choice do you think they're making? Like, I don't think they're going to be stupid enough to just buy all these games instead of doing what they got to do, you know what I'm saying? So I think with these special circumstances added in, I think that really convinces me that the average consumer is not willing to spend $70 during an economic crisis like this. But the current economic situation also seems to indicate that a lot of people are not going to be able to buy the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X also, especially if they're going to cost $500. And then the Dragon Sage says that if games do cost $70 on console, he's just going to switch to PC, but who knows if that's not going to also carry over to PC. Like, why would 2K charge $70 with their whole purpose being that next gen it offers so much more, but then still charge $60 on PC? I think if it's going to cost $70 on console, it's also going to cost $70 on PC. But if Sony and Microsoft keep their online subscription fee, PC gaming will still cost less than console gaming in the long run. So either way, it is probably worth it for you to make that switch. I switched to PC and I never looked back, and I have no plans on buying the PS5 or Series X. But speaking of PC, I also made a video talking about the possibility of all the PlayStation exclusives eventually making their way to PC. This topic, of course, was inspired by the recent release of Horizon Zero Dawn on PC. I actually don't think it's released yet. I think they'll release it in like a week or two, but it's coming soon on PC. And Horizon Zero Dawn, of course, is one of the most critically acclaimed exclusives on PlayStation 4. The fact that it's coming to PC has a lot of PC gamers hyped up, especially about the possibility of future PlayStation exclusives coming to PC eventually, to the point that every PlayStation exclusive will launch on PC day one, like you have right now with Microsoft exclusives. But I just can't envision a scenario where Sony decides to do what Microsoft is doing, where they put God of War, The Last of Us, day one, alongside the PS5, gets released on PC. I just don't see that ever happening. Now, is it possible that you'll have certain PlayStation exclusives that are like, 2, 3, 4 years old, kind of like Horizon, that will get a PC port. I mean, Sony's obviously messing around with PC a little bit, but as far as completely getting rid of their exclusives and not having exclusive content anymore, I just can't see that ever happening. If you see the interviews Sony's been doing, they keep saying, we're committed to exclusives. We're going to keep, even with PlayStation Now, that's their big service. You know how Microsoft, they're having all their games launched day one on Game Pass? Sony is saying, well, okay, we have PlayStation Now, but we're still going to have games launch $60 full price, and we're not going to put them on PlayStation Now day one. They'll come to PlayStation Now eventually, but for a few months at least, they will only be available to purchase full price. So obviously Sony and Microsoft don't have the same vision for their business models, right? Like, they're completely different companies. They have their own objectives to accomplish, right? Microsoft is entirely focused on the service, and Sony definitely wants people to subscribe to PlayStation Now, but it's obvious that Sony still cares about whether or not people buy their dedicated hardware. And it's like I described in my original video talking about this, Sony makes a shit ton of money off of people buying games off the PlayStation Store, right? If you take away exclusives, even if you just put them to PC, because people say, oh, PC gamers aren't going to buy a console anyway, well, if the games are good enough, they just might. And Sony's thinking that's still a lot of money on the table, because Sony doesn't necessarily care about how much copies of the game that they're selling, as much as they care about people who buy the console itself because of those games. And that's something that people don't seem to understand about the purpose of exclusives. It's not to sell a game to you, it's to sell a platform. When Sony releases all these exclusive games, they're not just selling the individual game to you, they're selling a brand. They're promoting their PlayStation brand. And the main component of the PlayStation brand is the PlayStation console itself. And there's no way Sony's just going to give up on that. But let's see what you guys have to say about the subject. Magnamaster says, hopefully Sony will realize that most PC gamers don't put up with this bullshit and won't spend over $50,000 to play a bad performing version of one game. Most PC gamers I have talked to only really give a shit about one of the PS4 exclusives, and they would never spend this kind of money to play them, especially not at 30 frames per second. I myself wouldn't even consider buying a platform unless it has at least 20 games I want that have a good enough frame rate to be played without taking puking breaks every hour. I didn't even jump on the PS3 until I became a huge Ratchet & Clank fan, and that fact added about 10 games of interest for me for that console. Even then, I buy all those games used because I don't see myself financially encouraging them to keep games exclusive. Well, I actually find it very interesting that you brought up the PlayStation 3 versus the PlayStation 4 in terms of exclusives. You bought a PS3 because there were a lot of games that you wanted to play, right? And in the PS4, there aren't so many games. And this is something I brought up in my latest video that we'll talk about later, about my top 5 most overrated consoles. I brought up the PlayStation 4 because there isn't a lot of genre variety. It's all third-person, single-player focused, narrative games. Like, they all have the same blueprint in them, and they kind of feel a lot repetitive, you know what I mean? Like, there's not a lot of variety in these PS4 exclusives, but on the PS3, you had Ratchet & Clank, which you just mentioned, a platformer game. You had another platformer game, Little Big Planet. You had Sly Cooper 4. That wasn't necessarily a great game, but you had so many games in different genres. You had the platformers, you had good racing games. I mean, Drive Club on PS4 was nothing to really gawk at, but on the PS3 you had a lot of good Gran Turismo games. And as far as the third-person action games go, you had Uncharted 2, you had Uncharted 3, you had The Last of Us 1, but that wasn't the entire focus of the PlayStation platform. You also had first-person shooters. You had MAG, which was a 256-player game. I'm still mad that game got shut down. I had so much fun with that. The Resistance trilogy, the Killzone trilogy, those were some really solid games, and they were all from different genres. How about kart racers? Anyone remember Mod Nation Racers? Yeah, haven't seen it on the PS4. So Magnamaster, I think when you say that a lot of people, including yourself, aren't interested in PS4 exclusives, I don't think that has to do with the fact that, oh, PC gaming is so much better, because don't get me wrong, I agree with you that PC gaming is the best gaming platform, but I think the way you feel about the PS4 has more to do with the quality of the PlayStation exclusives definitely going down this generation compared to the previous generation, the PS3. So while I definitely understand the sentiment that it's kind of bullshit that if you only want one game, you have to spend $500+ on one system and then buy the game for $60, it's just way too much money. It's not feasible for most people. But I can guarantee you, if the PS5 exclusives are anything like what we got in the PS3, a lot more of your PC friends are going to be interested in buying a PlayStation console. I can guarantee you that, because the PS3 is fucking legendary and had so many amazing exclusives. The PS4, on the other hand, was a big disappointment. Never mind the frame rates and all that stuff you brought up. It didn't matter if all the PS4 exclusives ran at 300 FPS. The games themselves just weren't on par with the previous PlayStation consoles, and I think that's the big reason why you feel that way about the PlayStation, because, you know, the PS3, it's definitely worth the money. because you had all those different games, and the PS2 as well, the PS1, oh my god, Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, Tomb Raider, so many amazing exclusives on that console as well. But I know we're kind of going off topic. We were supposed to be talking about PlayStation exclusives on PC, but the point I'm trying to make is that if the PS5 exclusives are good enough, people will buy the console. And for Sony, the more people that buy the console, the more money they'll make in the long run, because you got a lot of people that are going to be buying games on the PlayStation Store, and that's where Sony makes all their money. And then we have Lord of the Rings Rehydrated. You're right, there will be fewer console sales as Sony releases their games on PC. However, Sony cares more about profit than console sales. Sure, console sales are their main vehicle to achieve profit, but if their PC ports offset and surpass the cost of the consoles they didn't sell, then more ports will happen. But how is it possible that PC sales will offset and surpass the console sales they missed out on, you may ask? Well, we don't know how many fewer console sales will come from these PC ports. 10 million, 3 million, 500,000? We assume it's high, but no one knows. How many normies could/would cross over? That's the big question. Remember, PC has a higher barrier to entry. Sony's experimenting here because they know the next gen won't be as easy as the 8th gen. One day, every game will come to PC through emulation, but as far as official releases go, I'm not saying it will 100% happen, but if Sony's profit outweighs their losses, it probably will. I said never to Horizon coming to PC, and well, never say never. Well, I think you're absolutely right, especially when you say that Sony would consider putting more games on PC if it makes them more money to do so. If they make so much more money off of PC game sales than they ever could in selling the actual consoles, then you're absolutely right that they would consider moving away from exclusive content. But as it stands right now, I don't think that is true. I don't think that's the case. Maybe next generation that will be different, but I think as it stands right now, I don't think exclusive content is going anywhere. I think Sony still wants to be committed to exclusive games. I think exclusive games make Sony a lot of money, and I don't think they want to get rid of that. But you're absolutely right that if circumstances change, they will have no problem putting games on PC because they're a corporation. They do whatever they can to maximize profits. But you're definitely right when you say never in video games, because who would have thought anyone who grew up in the early 90s couldn't even possibly imagine Sonic the Hedgehog being released on Nintendo platform and Sega not making consoles anymore. I mean, 25 years ago, that was unfathomable, but it happened. You got Sonic Adventure on GameCube. And how about all those Sonic games that they made exclusively for the Wii? What was it? Sonic and the Black Knight, Sonic and the Secret 7 Rings, whatever the fuck it was called. And Sega hasn't made a new console in 21 years. So a lot can change in a very short period of time because the video game industry is always changing, adapting, evolving, maybe sometimes devolving. So there could be a future where exclusives just don't exist. Whatever platform you choose to play on, you can play whatever game you want. To me, that sounds like a fantasy, but it's possible. But it's only possible if business and if the market allows for it to happen. In the current circumstances, I just don't think Sony wants to give up on exclusives. But that could change in the next 5 to 10 years. Never say never. Maybe in 10 years we'll be playing on Google Stadia. Anything's possible. Moving on to my next video where I talk about why you should never pre-order games. It's something that kind of pisses me off that people complain about how awful these games are, the quality is not good, so much shit missing from these games that, that you had years ago, but these modern AAA games are just missing so much and it's just not a full experience. You're paying $60, but you're not getting the full experience that you want. Well, that's what happens when you give them your money before the game even comes out. That's what pre-ordering is. And if you're the type of person that always complains about the state of modern AAA games, but you pre-order all these games, you're part of the problem, and you need to realize that. And that's pretty much what my video was about. I think pre-ordering is one of the biggest problems we have in the video game industry because you're guaranteeing money to these developers that haven't proven themselves yet. And if you have all these pre-orders, that kind of disincentivizes the developer from doing as good of a job as possible because you're already giving them your money. I understood the reason why you had pre-orders back in the day, but with digital gaming pretty much taking over, it makes no sense to pre-order something. Is it really worth that useless skin that you get as a pre-order bonus? Like, why do so many people do this? Doesn't make much sense. But Sierra Air thinks I'm a hypocrite for calling out people that pre-order games. Self-awareness, 0. You talked about preloading digital games by pre-ordering them a few videos ago and called it a benefit. Now you're confused as to why people pre-order digital games. You should stop trying to be something you're not. Sierra's comment was in reference to a video I made a little while back talking about the benefits of digital versus physical in the context of Sony releasing a cheaper disc-free model of the PS5. And what Sierra is referencing to specifically is in that video, I said that preloading digital games is a benefit as opposed to going to GameStop and standing on the line, midnight release, whatever, if you're buying a new game. You can pre-order the game on digital and preload it, and you'll be ready to go as soon as the game launches at midnight. And I said that's a benefit of digital gaming in that previous video. But in the video that I'm talking about right now that Sierra commented on, I'm talking about how pre-orders are bad. And Sierra thinks that's hypocritical for me to say that in that video, but in the previous video talking about how pre-ordering and digital preloading is a benefit of digital. But I mentioned preloading games as a benefit in the context of digital versus physical. I don't think that makes me a hypocrite. If anyone else feels that way, definitely let me know in the comments, but I think the context of those two videos were different enough that I'm not necessarily contradicting myself, because I didn't even say that I personally enjoyed preloading games and playing them at midnight. You guys know I don't pre-order shit. Most of the games I play are months, sometimes years old. I don't care about buying new games day one. But for the average person, preloading is a benefit over physical, and it was just me talking about how physical media is getting phased out by digital. So I apologize if there was any confusion about that. Then we have Damn Cobnet, who says, the problem is people who dictate what others should do and not do with their own money. I don't give a damn if you approve of my pre-orders. Get over yourself and don't worry about what I do. I don't care if you take $1,000, put it in a blender, and grind it up. I don't give a shit what you do with your money. I don't care if you wipe your ass with it. That's not the point that I'm trying to make here. But as I said in that video, and even just a couple minutes ago, your actions are affecting other people. People like you that pre-order games, you're part of the reason why the quality of the games have gone down considerably over this past generation, because people keep pre-ordering games, giving developers money before the game's even out, which is just ass backwards, and it has a lot of consequences. Like, why do you think most jobs pay people after they work, not before? Because if you already got paid for a job you didn't do yet, yeah, you're going to be less incentivized to do as good of a job compared to when you don't get the money until you finish the job. So pre-ordering is definitely a problem, because it's part of the reason why the quality of games are not as good as they should be. Because you're giving money to these companies that haven't earned it yet. And that's all I was trying to convey in that video, that pre-orders do have consequences that a lot of people don't realize. But Shut It Down says, you're trying to rationalize with mindless fanboys. Yeah, that's pretty much what that video was. That video obviously went over a lot of people's heads. They didn't understand what I was trying to say. It pretty much went in one ear, out the other. And if you continue to pre-order games, that's fine. But all I'm trying to say is don't complain at the same time that these games aren't as good as you want them to be. That's pretty much all I was trying to say. But it seems that a lot of people took it the wrong way. It got a pretty good amount of dislikes. But I still stand by everything I said in the video because it's 100% true. And if you don't like it, that's too bad. Moving on to my next video where I revisited the topic of backwards compatibility on PlayStation 5, more specifically, whether or not the PlayStation 5 can play PS1, PS2, and PS3 games, because we already know there's going to be PS4 backwards compatibility. Now, as far as how exactly that's going to work, we don't know exactly what the details are, and that whole presentation that Mark Cerny made was very confusing for a lot of people. So who knows exactly how it's going to work on PS5, but you did have a couple of rumors that suggested that there will be PS1, PS2, and PS3 backwards compatibility via the cloud, except the patent that people were referring to that I mentioned in the video was a patent that was filed in 2012, which was actually for PlayStation Now. When we're talking about the cloud, that's what PlayStation Now is. And you already have PlayStation Now, so that patent has nothing to do with PS5 backwards compatibility. It's an old patent that people found that had more to do with PlayStation Now before it came out. So one of the main reasons why I made that video was to kind of debunk the fake news that was spreading all over the internet, because that's what it was fake news. There is no patent that suggests that Sony has any plans for PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, and PlayStation 3 backwards compatibility via any method. But on the other hand, Sony has yet to confirm or deny full backwards compatibility for the PS5, so it's possible that might be coming, but definitely not at launch. I will say this, if the PS5 does turn out to have full backwards compatibility, I'm going to be a lot more likely to buy that console than I am right now, because currently I don't give a shit. I got my gaming PC, I'm good, but if I could play every PlayStation game, that would honestly be so worth it. I even suggested the idea, since Sony is releasing 2 different PlayStation 5s, they're going to release a discless PS5 and one that has a disc tray in it. Why not release a third one that has native hardware backwards compatibility, so it has a PS1, PS2, PS3 built into the console, so that Sony doesn't even have to rely on software emulation. The people who care about backwards compatibility, they can shell out the extra cash for it, because the thing about software emulation that you have on the Xbox, it's cool. It's definitely a lot better than having nothing. But the way it goes, each game has to be licensed for sale, because every game that's backwards compatible is also in the Xbox store. But you have certain games where the license is expired, or you also have sports games which they just don't even bother making backwards compatible. And there's still hundreds of Xbox 360 games that you cannot play on the Xbox One right now. So I'd rather have it just be hardware backwards compatibility. If it's a bit more expensive, like $100 more, that's perfectly fine. I would actually consider buying that. And anyone in the chat right now, let me know if that's something that you would want to see. Like, if you want to see a special edition PS5 that has all the hardware components of all the previous generations built into one console, and maybe it costs $600, like it's expensive, but I think it would be worth it. Let me know if you guys feel the same way. Let's see if we have any good comments on here. It's Fritz writes, Sony does have the technology to build a PS3 emulator. The current PS3 emulator for PC is built by a small team making it free, so it's a passion project, and while it's not perfect, a lot of the games are running really well, especially after the recent update. So Sony, a billion-dollar corporation, can definitely get a PS3 emulator going. I'm not denying it's difficult, but it's nowhere near impossible. I think Sony's just being lazy. I think Fritz's comment is in reference to a point I made in the video that is, I guess, a little defensive of Sony, but I wasn't trying to come out that way. Like, I'm not trying to be a Sony fanboy and just, like, justify everything that company does, but I was saying it's possible that maybe the PS3 emulator is very difficult for Sony to develop, and they just might not have that technology yet. Of course they have the PS1 and PS2, but they might not have the PS3, because the PS3 is really difficult to emulate. Even the PC emulator that you mentioned, I believe you're talking about RCPS3, that emulator has a really inconsistent performance. There are some games that run great, but a lot of them are basically unplayable, so you still got a long way to go before that emulator is fully functional, but I understand what you're trying to say. If a small team can accomplish everything they accomplished, Sony can definitely create a full PS3 emulator, and there's no doubt that they can. I think the question is whether or not they think it's worth it. And as of right now, that question remains unanswered because we haven't gotten any confirmation one way or the other if Sony is planning full backwards compatibility on PS5. And if they are, it'd probably be software emulation, not the hardware emulation that I suggested a couple minutes ago. But I guess we're just gonna have to wait and see what happens. Then I made a video responding to a ridiculous article I found on PCGamer.com of all websites trying to make the case that Steam is way too complicated, has too many features. So let's see how you guys reacted to that. Memes or Dreams writes, how does somebody hate the Steam interface? It's arguably simpler than Xbox or PlayStation Store and doesn't lag constantly. Exactly. The Steam interface is amazing, especially after the overhaul it got last year, because it kind of felt a little bit old, but it was still functional, but the big UI overhaul it got last year made it even better. But Steam has always been very easy to use, very easy to navigate, so I found it very puzzling that a PC gaming publication of all the websites, they're trying to say that Steam is too complicated? That's just bewildering to me. What the hell happened to PCGamer.com? Can anyone tell me? But I guess PCGamer.com isn't the only one that's changed a lot over the years, because we got a comment from the real Minecraft Steve who says, damn, I remember when you were lying about Steam not having voice chat. Good to see you improve since then. And of course, this is a reference to that infamous video I made, how to win a PC versus console debate. Got the attention of many prominent PC gamer YouTubers like Rags. I actually think Rags' response to me was actually the first video that Rags ever made on YouTube, and it's been over 5 years since I made that video, and it's still one of the things I'm best known for. So I find it funny that people still comment about that years later, and people who haven't seen my channel in years are like, oh my god, you've improved so much, you're like a completely different person. I always get a kick out of that. But as far as me lying about Steam not having voice chat 5 years ago, I don't even lie. I didn't even know that they had voice chat. I just assumed they didn't because I never used it. It's just, I don't know, I was pretty stupid back then. But as far as Steam being too complicated, that's one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard because it's just so goddamn easy. It literally can't get any easier to use. Then I made a discussion video talking about whether or not gamers are too demanding. Do gamers just expect way too much out of their games? Are they unappreciative of the hard work that developers put into the creation of these games? And the TLDR is no. I don't think gamers are too demanding. I think they're not demanding enough. Captain Crunch seems to disagree a little bit. He says, I don't know, seems like there's a feeding frenzy powered by social media. So of course he's talking about the outrage that you see on Twitter whenever anything happens in the gaming world. You have so many people that are outraged and they get pissed off, and I guess in that case, like, there are definitely a lot of toxic mobs in the video game community. I'm not going to deny that, but in the grand scheme of things, when it comes to the loot boxes, when it comes to the microtransactions, and all the shit that these companies do to fuck over the consumer, I think gamers are not demanding enough when it comes to putting an end to that shit. And in video games and in just life in general, you're always going to have people that are unhappy, but ultimately I think we should expect more out of our games, not less. So if you haven't watched that video yet, I think I gave a pretty interesting commentary on that subject, so definitely check it out if you haven't already. I think it came out really good. And then we have this video talking about Xbox Live getting more expensive, and oh my god, the Xbox fanboys, they lost their shit over this video. A video where I just talk about Microsoft removing the 12-month Xbox Live Gold membership, which is $60 a year, which means that the cheapest option you can get is $25 in 3 months, which equals $100 a year. I had so many Microsoft fanboys trying to tell me that I'm being unfair, I'm coming up with fake news. How is it fake news? It's exactly what happened. You can't get a 12-month Xbox Live membership. But according to this guy, I'm just a PlayStation fanboy. Okay, not sure how you can reach that conclusion from me just reporting the facts, but whatever. This guy's obviously delusional. And this is the top comment on the video, and I got so many comments just like this one, saying that they could also be removing the paywall and making it free. Well, that would be great if they did, but I don't think you should hold your breath on that. I mean, that would be awesome, but there's no indication yet that that's what their plan is, because if that's the case, if they're gonna make Xbox Live Gold free, what the hell are you waiting for? Because right now, my membership expires tomorrow, and if I don't renew it, I can't play my games online. So, where's all this optimistic coming from? Why are people so optimistic that Microsoft is going to make Xbox Live free? I think it's just because you have these hardcore Xbox fanboys that are just hoping that Microsoft is not that fucking stupid to raise the online multiplayer prices, because at that point it becomes really hard to defend Xbox, you know? I think that's what it is. They want to keep it in their head that Xbox is the greatest platform of all time, and that Phil Spencer can never do anything wrong, but if they raise the online multiplayer, like, their whole world comes crashing down, you know what I mean? And I see all these dislikes, and it's just funny to me. These Xbox fanboys are getting so triggered for no reason. Then I had a thread going on with this guy called Kevin Lee. He said, many insiders are saying it's actually going to be free. Why would Microsoft sink themselves right before a new generation? Doesn't make any sense if they really made Xbox Live more expensive. LOL. And I responded, I said, it didn't make any sense for them to try and put an always online DRM for the Xbox One, but they tried that in 2013. Don't count on Microsoft being pro-consumer. And then he mentioned insiders, so I'm like, what insiders? Colt Eastwood? Like, who are these insiders that they keep mentioning that Xbox Live is going to be free? Until you hear it from Microsoft, you can't confirm shit. So I don't really care what these jerk-offs, so I really don't care what these jerk-offs on Twitter and YouTube said. As far as my video is concerned, I'm only reporting official information. And when I do speculate, I don't pretend that it's a fact. It's just speculation, but you guys are taking this speculation, this very hopeful speculation, and passing it off as a fact, as confirmed information. And I'm like, where is this coming from? Some jerk-off on Twitter that has a blue check mark next to his name? Why should I care about what he has to say? But continuing on, he says, Microsoft has had a very good track record of being pro-consumer at Xbox since Phil Spencer became head at Xbox. Obviously completely different than they were in 2013. But if you're this much of a fanboy, I'm not surprised you only see what you want to see instead of the blatant evidence laid out over the years. Shaking my head. What fucking evidence do you have that Xbox Live is going to be free? Where is it? So I respond saying, clearly you're the fanboy here. You're trying to tell me Xbox Live is going to be free and tell me I'm wrong, while I'm the one with the facts and confirmed information, while you have none of that. And then he backtracks. He says, actually, I'm not saying they will do anything. I'm merely saying what if. It's called speculation, but you're spouting your opinions while saying they're backed by facts, which is not true considering Microsoft hasn't clarified anything. So unless you work at Microsoft, based on your heavy track record of bias against Microsoft, I doubt you work for them. We can take your comments for what they are. Speculation. Stop being such a narcissist, my dude. All we can do is speculate until Microsoft confirms anything. So don't go around saying your bullshit is based off facts, which is far from the truth. But isn't that exactly what you were doing? Okay, now you're saying it's speculation, but you were trying to say that it was true that Xbox Live is going free. It's not free right now, and that's all that matters. My subscription expires tomorrow. So if they really are making it free, why do I still have to pay for it? So yes, as of right now, Xbox Live Gold is more expensive than it was a month ago. That's not an opinion, that's not speculation, that's a fact. Something that fanboys don't like, I guess. And he also mentioned my track record of being anti-Xbox. Well, if you actually have looked at my previous videos, you also know that I'm against paid online. So why would I want Microsoft to charge more for Xbox Live? It makes no fucking sense. I think this Kevin Lee guy, his uncle must be his father. Because how else can this guy be that fucking dumb? But whatever, these fanboys can think whatever they want. Moving on, I also did a live stream in the month of July, and that actually, I had so much fun doing that. It's honestly the best fun I had on YouTube in a really long time. I definitely need to do more live streams. That's definitely something I have to do, because that last one turned out really good. Everyone that was there had a really good time. So, hey, anyone in the chat right now, let me know any other live stream ideas that you guys have for me. Do you want me to react to more of my older videos? Do you want me to just chill in front of a camera, or do you want gameplay? Let me know. So we got 2 more videos in the month of July. One of them talking about Spider-Man Miles Morales running at 60 FPS in performance mode on the PS5. So it's just me talking about how it's cool that you do have that 60 FPS option, so you can play at a higher resolution at a lower frame rate if you want, but you can also choose to run at a lower resolution and a higher frame rate. I think it's great that console gamers are getting more options in how to play their games, but let's see what you guys have to say. Summonon says 60 FPS for PS5 is great news for everyone. I hope this is the norm for consoles in the future because 30 FPS is just disgraceful if the PS5 is supposed to be like a high-end PC. Yeah, I definitely feel that way, that the PS5 is supposed to be on par with the 2080 Super, which we know it's not, but the fact that it has ray tracing capabilities, that you have a console that even still runs games at 30 FPS, that just seems really weird. At least Sony is giving us the option because they understand that there are a lot of people that would rather play in 60 FPS than play at the highest resolution, the highest textures, and this should definitely be an option for any PlayStation 5 game that would be capped at 30 FPS. You should always have the option to play at least 60 because, in my opinion, 30 FPS is pretty much unplayable. It's like, I didn't mind it for so many years being on console and only playing on console, but once I went to 60 on PC, I can't go back. And anyone who went from console to PC knows exactly what I'm talking about. Going from 30 FPS to 60 is amazing, but going back from 60 to 30 is just fucking terrible. It's a nightmare. Then finally, I made a video talking about the top 5 overrated consoles in video game history. It actually took me a really long time to make that video, to edit it, to put everything together. And for some reason, the videos I put the most effort into get the least amount of views. It's kind of strange how that goes, but it seems that you guys find my gaming history videos and my top 5, top 10 videos, you find them less interesting than my other content, but there are a good amount of you that enjoyed it and you were really engaged. The watch time was really good. For a 13-minute video, it got 6.5 minutes, that's 50%, so the watch time is good. All the other metrics are good, just the views weren't very high. But I did enjoy making it and putting the video together, and like I said earlier, views aren't everything, so I'm still glad with how it turned out, and there are a good amount of you that enjoyed it, so that's all that matters. We had Dr. Dan who responded to every entry I had on the list of the top 5 overrated consoles. So at number 5, he said, yeah, the PS2 is overrated. Sure, it has a huge library, but a lot of the games are shovelware. The controller felt bad in quite a few game genres, and the games often didn't run the best. And I'm glad you mentioned the fact that it only sold so much because of the DVD player capabilities. I still love the PS2, it has many great games, but I feel the GameCube and Xbox are better, especially with multi-platform games. Yeah, that pretty much hits all the points I made talking about the PS2. And then number 4, he says, I agree with the PS4 also. It's very weak and only has select few killer games. All of them felt the same, and the paid for online didn't help matters. Best part about PS4 to me was the controller, which I use my phone and PC. But other than that, it's a pretty mediocre console in my opinion that lacks the games and heart and soul of the previous consoles. And he also agrees with my entry on the Switch at number 3. He said, I played the Switch with my brothers a handful of times in games like Mario Party and Smash Ultimate, and to be honest, they felt meh and didn't make me want to get my own, as honestly the console feels like a stupid gimmick, and I don't feel like spending $300 on a glorified tablet with a few first-party games that are amazing. And with number 2, he also agrees about the Wii, but not the way that I would think. He says, I think the Wii is a very fun system with lots of great memorable games on it, and it was good for playing with friends or family, but at the same time, yeah, it's not as amazing as it's made out to be. The GameCube was better, and a lot of the Wii games, to be honest, were shovelware and poor quality third-party ports. The motion controls, while good in some games, were just bad in other games, and frankly, they were shoehorned in too often for my tastes. Thankfully, there were still many good games on the Wii that didn't prioritize them and allowed you to use other controllers. But to be honest, for a while, I mainly used my Wii for playing GameCube games because I found them more worthwhile. I still love the Wii as it was one of my first consoles, and it has one of the top 5 favorite games ever with Mario Kart Wii, but yeah, it could have been a lot better. I think it's better than the Switch, though. I think I'd actually agree with you. I think the Wii is a lot more enjoyable than the Switch, but I still think it's more overrated than the Switch considering how amazing the Wii is sold, but I mean, they've still got a few more years of the Switch. Maybe it will sell a lot of units. Probably not as much as the Wii, though. But I guess we'll see how that goes. And then number 1, he says, I'm not sure what to say here as I haven't played Pong much, but I can say Pong is a very basic game that's fun for a few rounds, but doesn't have lasting impact. Makes you wonder how it became as popular as it was. Then again, I suppose since it's all they had at the time, they didn't really know what else to compare it to, and so it seemed amazing. Well, yeah, the actual Pong game, I'm not trying to say that it was a bad game, but the actual Pong console is definitely overrated because it was overshadowing the Magnavox Odyssey, which was the first console and also had the same exact game that Pong had. Now, you can argue that Pong was a higher quality version of that same game, but I just think that the praise that Pong gets as being one of the most influential things in gaming history, I think it's a bit overrated, especially in the context of the Magnavox Odyssey being underrated. And that's also how I came up with the entries on my list, not just looking at the console itself being overrated and overappreciated by the gaming community, but also the other consoles in the same generation being underappreciated because that console is overrated, if that makes any sense. So That's part of the reason why I put the PS2 up there, just because of how it completely demolished the Xbox and GameCube, even though the Xbox and GameCube were amazing consoles, and that's how I came up with my list. And Pan Llama says I should have put the PS4 as the most overrated because it has less exclusive games than the PS3, especially PS2, as you mentioned, 30 FPS in most games, paid online, the console itself, especially the Pro, inferior to the Xbox One X, and in his country, the basic PS4 costs more than the Xbox One X, twice as much as the One S. Okay, so in your particular case, I would say actually, yeah, the Xbox One is much better than the PS4 in terms of the price. It's weird that the PS4 costs more than the Xbox One. I wonder why that's the case. Very interesting. But the PS4 is definitely overrated, but I felt like the other consoles I had ahead of it, like the Switch, the Wii, and Pong, I felt like they were even more overrated, but I could see why you would put the PS4 at number 1, especially with your own circumstances, that the Xbox One X is cheaper than the original PS4. That's just so strange. I'm curious to know what country you live in where that's a thing. And then Magnum Master provided his own list of his top 5 overrated consoles, and he also disagrees with my pick for the Wii as an overrated console, because he thinks the Wii is actually underrated. So many people shit on it like you do in this video, but it actually has a ton of really awesome games. Sure, the motion control sucked in a lot of third-party titles, but the Wii games that never focused on the motion controls were largely really good, and the Wiimote and Nunchuck are pretty comfortable, and the layout and controls are done well. Well, the thing about the Wiimote and Nunchuck is that for a lot of games it actually is required, and that definitely affects the enjoyment that you can get, because you're forced to use those gimmicky motion controls that, I mean, they were fine for certain games, like I said, with bowling and all that shit, but for real games, it was kind of tacky. And the classic controller was fucking terrible. You had to have it attached to the Wiimote at all times, and it just felt really awkward, really weird. The GameCube controller is good, but like I said, not all games allow you to use it. But let's see what your top 5 overrated consoles are. At number 5, you have the Genesis/Mega Drive. He says, the console is awesome, I will admit that, but it's nowhere close to the SNES. Not a bad console, great even, but the SNES was just way further ahead of it than most people say. I don't know about that. I think the Genesis really gave Nintendo a run for their money. You did have amazing games on that console, so I will disagree with you on that. I don't think the Genesis is overrated at all. Number 4, he actually has a Sega Dreamcast. He says, yes, it did a lot of cool stuff and had a pretty decent selection of games in its early days, but honestly, the moment the competition released, it didn't have a chance anymore, and for a reason. The controller was really not great, the file size of the games wasn't very big, limiting the potential, and it died before its library could really become as great as people claim it actually is. I'd actually agree with you on that. If I had to make a top 6 overrated consoles, maybe I'd put the Dreamcast at number 6, but maybe I'd also not, considering that the Dreamcast was a financial disaster for Sega and made them drop out of the console race, so maybe it wasn't so overrated because it didn't do particularly well, but I can definitely see where you're coming from. At number 3, he put the Nintendo 64 as the 3rd most overrated console. He says, this console has a lot of games with potential, but almost all of them aged so badly that it makes me wonder how people could play some of the games back in the day. Coming from the 60 FPS experience of the SNES, the 30 FPS or lower, sometimes even 20 FPS, were absolutely horrendous on the N64. The library of excellent games is far less vast than those of the NES, SNES, and GameCube. It was one of Nintendo's most disappointing consoles for me regarding the overall experience. I guess you do have a point there. I mean, I definitely agree with you. The N64 wasn't that great. I just didn't count it as the most overrated because financially it didn't do particularly well, but it's still definitely more overrated than underrated when you look at how people praise the N64 these days as one of the greatest consoles ever made. It's definitely not. And at number 2, he actually has the Xbox 360 as the 2nd most overrated console. He says, everyone loves this console, but the games it has to offer are largely not very great experiences. People are stupid enough to pay for online, established that anti-consumer practice among others, and instead of continuing the great quality experience in the previous generation, it was full of the kinds of really generic and boring games, and a lot of the games on it don't work well on the platform itself, and it was very faulty, the red ring, disc scratching, just a bad system overall, and people praise it even though it deserves no credit. I think that's very interesting that you say that, because at least when it comes to the system being faulty, the PS3 was not any better, and I think it actually was a little bit worse. Like the yellow light of death, my PS3 broke on me after a few months of buying it new, like the big fat PS3 back in the day. So as far as build quality, the PS3 isn't much better. And as far as the exclusives, I actually will agree with you that the PS3 exclusives were better, but I think the Xbox 360 was overall still a really solid console, so I wouldn't agree that it is necessarily overrated. I think it's properly rated. Definitely more enjoyable than the Wii. And the number 1, he has the PS4. Everything he mentioned in this video and then some. The games on it are not actually anywhere close to as good as people say they are, and pretty much all games I have seen like it run like ass. People praise it over Xbox One, but honestly is only a little bit less shitty. I totally agree with you on that, but I just wouldn't have it at number 1. PS4 definitely is not a great console. It's not a bad console, but it's not good either. It's just meh. But thank you all for leaving your comments and continuously supporting the channel. It means so much to me. And I hope you guys enjoyed this month's recap. Let me know if you have any suggestions on what you want to see in the channel in the future, anything I could do to improve the quality of my content, or just videos that you want to see in general. Definitely leave your suggestions in the comments down below. And for those of you that tuned into the live premiere, I hope you all have a great night, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.